Over the past year, I've been updating one world every 500 game days. In this time, this world has become my obsession, and I've played 1,300 plus hours, being over 4,000 game days, experiencing 8 total versions of the game. Today I'm going to show you what I did in each of those versions. Right, so to start off with, this is the blank seed of the world that I spawned on. I spawned on the little island to the side, but this is the main area that I ended up developing. So moving on from that, this is the first backup of the world that I had, spawning in the same area. And one of the first projects I got going with when I started playing on the world was a big quarry project, which you can see here. It's early days at this point, but you'll see how that grows over time. And I also started a little house down this tunnel, which looks out on the island I spawned on. This is how the world was on the final day of Alpha 1.0.4. I built a little castle and a little house on the island I spawned on, which has a nice view of the mainland area, which now also has a little lighthouse and some paths on it. The quarry project has developed a heck of a lot in the last version, which gave me over 100,000 cobblestone to be building with. And outside of digging, I also did some building, so we got more paths around this hole. I built some little houses, and I built a greenhouse for my farm to keep the mobs out because they kept trampling all my crops and it was really annoying. And on top of all of that, I started using all the cobblestone that I got to build a big maze, which is where I left it off for this version as I got to day 500. This is day 1000, being the last day of Alpha 1.1.2_01. And one of the most notable changes was these farms. This is the update that added sugarcane, which I had a mild obsession with when it got added. So I made a pretty big sugarcane field with a little castle bridge to go over it, which is also a great viewing platform to look at everything from. Now next to the maze, there's more paths and a little tree farm. And more importantly, the shell of a soon-to-be library on some custom terrain, because this is a bit off the ground, as you can see from the inside, with the forest that's grown there, which also has a great view of the main area. Another thing that I did in this version was my first proper interior designed to actually look like a house on the inside. It's interesting, it's primitive because there's not much you can do in Alpha in terms of interior, but I tried. And lastly, in this version, I kept digging in the quarry project, which is now considerably bigger. It's over double the size as it was in the last update. Now this is Alpha 1.2.6, being my final version of Alpha on day 1500. The biggest change to note is biomes finally got added, so everything's not that thickly neon green that it used to be. And the nether got added, finally, which we'll take a look at later. Now one of the biggest things for this update that I was working on was a castle on the opposite side of the maze, which houses a nether portal to travel across my land area a lot faster, with a little mini nether hub, which is very undecorated at the moment. Another project I worked on in this time was an Alpha Block Museum. This holds one of every block in the game at the time, minus a few because they weren't yet obtainable. Moving on to Beta 1.2, being on day 2000, this version added sandstone and dyeable wool, and I used them both here in this farm region of the world that I developed. These houses also have primitive interiors with an attempt at a bed before beds were added. Another thing I worked on in this time was a little village area to the left of the castle, and it features a little tree farm behind it with a big glass roof to prevent the trees from getting too tall, but I later changed that because I thought it was ugly. One of the last things I worked on in this version was this little house, which is the beginnings of a little village project, and it features one of my favorite interiors I've done in this version so far. And of course, whilst all this was going on, I was doing lots of mining in the background, which you can see here. Next we have beta 1.4 that added new slab types, smooth lighting, wolves, and a few other things. One of the things I worked on in this version was this little bridge thing that you'll see a heck of a lot more later, and mainly this village that I showed off the start of in the last update. Another thing I was working on in this version was my mob farm area, which has got a very nice view of my world and has gotten me lots of mob drops, which has been great for things like bone meal and TNT. Next update I did was beta 1.5, being the update that added different types of saplings, lightning, and rails. That lightning did cause me to have a pretty big issue over in my village though, which happened live on stream over on my Twitch. Why is that? Why are you standing? Oh god. Why are they both there? Oh my god. Oh my god. Wow. That explains why the dogs were standing up. Huh. After getting that all repaired, I was working on this little area under the bridge that I built with a neat little wheat field. And after that, I also worked on a little train station, which can take me from spawn to my little village area that burnt down. And the main thing that I was doing in this version was just a lot of digging. The hole expanded massively in this time. Next up was beta 1.6, which was pretty big for me, adding tall grass, trapdoors, and the ability to bone meal the ground to get tall grass and flowers and stuff, making flowers renewable for the first time, which also allowed me to get renewable dyes. This meant that one of the biggest changes in the world at this time was literally just me walking around, adding grass wherever there should be grass. At the same time, I also worked a lot more on this area under the bridge, adding more houses and a little hobbit hole under the right side. I also finally got around to decorating the back side of the castle. I added the little cube emblem to it, and I did a slight bit of interior. Not finished though, but it's a good start. Moving on from that, by the farms, I did this pretty big terraforming and building project for a spruce tree farm, which was done entirely on stream over on my Twitch. I've got plenty of spruce from this. Another project I worked on in this time was turning my old mob farm into ruins and building a maze around it. This was only early days in this version though. It had a lot more progress done on it in beta 1.7. The last thing I worked on in this time was the cliffs around the Valley of Sugarcane. I got really obsessed with terraforming for a bit, so I just kind of went ham on the edges, and I really liked the way it turned out. Finally, there's beta 1.7.3, which is the main version that the Golden Age community plays on. This version changed the cobblestone texture and added pistons and shears. The biggest project I worked on in this version was the village area, building lots of shopfront style buildings, or attempting to, and a lot of general house looking buildings to add to the neighborhood. Another big project for this version was building a lot of farms and this little hobbit hole area with full interior that I was pretty happy with, and I added a bee in the sky above where the farms start up from the maze. A project that was long overdue its completion was the library. I finally in this update filled in the interior with an actual library rather than a forest that like it used to be. I'd say this was a much needed upgrade. I also went and upgraded my lighthouse build, which was one of the first things I added to the world, but now it has a little house at the bottom with full interior and a great view of the world from the top. The last thing I worked on in this version was the tree farm area, which I previously mentioned. I didn't like the glass roof over it, so I built terrain over it and put little holes in the ground so then you can see the trees below. Also built this little house that I really liked the interior of. I think it's my favorite interior I've built in old Minecraft, and it's got a nice view of the tree farm area. And that takes us to modern day, where I've now updated to beta 1.8, being the first version where I can sprint, stack my food, turn up my brightness, craft glass panes, iron bars. There's so much that's changed in this last update. So if you want to follow my journey, you can follow me over on Twitch and subscribe for semi-regular update videos on what I'm doing in the world. But anyway, thank you so much for watching and goodbye.